20 pieces of artillery, about 30 colors, and 2 generals. Most of that happening just in the first minutes of this attack, as the Confederates are caught off guard, as they are overwhelmed by the Union advance. The experience of being captured, if you're along this line, is harrowing. Howard, who is captured, said, "I retained my sword in hand after some hesitation whether or not to throw it away or stick it in the ground. One man took it out of my hand, and another came up while he was doing so, and drawing a large clasped knife from his pocket and opening it, I wondered if he was going to stab me. He cut the scabbard from my leather belt, and they went their several ways with their trophies. We were ordered to the rear." Along with staff officers like McHenry Howard, caught up in this wave of attack are two Confederate generals. The first, Edward Allegheny Johnson. Frank had a brief description of Johnson. Johnson has spent an extremely restless night. He believes the reports that an attack is forming out in front of his line, and he is waiting. Spends the entire evening nervously waiting for an attack, sleeping in his clothes. When the attack comes, there is an excellent report of Johnson standing on these very works with his most famous tool, a hickory walking stick. It had, at some point in time, earned him the nickname Old Clubby, and he is putting that old club to good use this morning. He is parrying blows from Union bayonets, and what's more, he's beating them down with it. One man wrote, "I could see General Johnson with his cane striking at the enemy as they leaped over the works, and a sputtering fire swept up and down our line, many guns being damp. I also saw General Johnson with his cane striking in the crowd and warding bayonets." Perhaps not the most effective weapon out here on the battlefield, but an inspiring scene nonetheless. But he is swept up in this attack soon after. Many men wrote it was a miracle that he was not killed as he's standing on the works using his walking stick. He's swept up, taken to the rear of Union lines, at which point he has an interview with Winfield Scott Hancock. Hancock knew Johnson from before the war, and so offered his hand and said, "General Johnson, I am glad to see you." Johnson replied, "General Hancock, this is worse than death to me." Hancock replied, "This is the fate of war, General, and you must not forget that you are a soldier." But it was a rough morning for Allegheny Johnson, as it had been a rough night the day before. One man looking at him said, "At this time, his appearance was rough indeed, some of his rather scanty, sandy-colored hair sticking through a rent in his old slouch hat. He was belaboring the men behind the works with a stick, so I was told, to make them stand up when captured, and came near being killed by paying no heed to calls to surrender." Johnson found many uses for his walking stick.